Sleeping with the Enemy, Asian and Latino Connection. And we're just going to read about marriage in Black America, blackdemographics.com. I'm going to have the link in the description box. Marriage has been a declining institution among all Americans, and this decline is even more evident in the Black community. In 2016, only 29% of African Americans were married, compared to 48% of all Americans. Half, or 50%, of African Americans have never been married, compared to 33% of all Americans. After viewing the available data, we can see that although fewer Black women are now married, more Black women than Black men have been married at least once. This is because a higher percentage of Black women are divorced and widowed than men. Also in 2016, just under half, or 48%, of Black women have never been married, which is up from 44% in 2008 and 42.7% in 2005. Mm-hmm. Scrolling on down. It is also believed that a large percentage of Black men marry white women. This is often cited as one of the causes of low marriage rates among Black women. This, however, is only partially true. While Black men marry white women at twice the rate Black women marry white men, in 2017 only 15% of Black men were married to non-Black women, which makes up 11%, which was up from 11% in 2010. About 3/5 of those non-Black women were white. So there is evidence of an increase of Black men marrying out of their racial demographic. As a matter of fact, the Pew Research Center released a report finding that 25% of black male newlyweds in 2013 married non-Black women, compared to 12% of Black women who married out. However, Asian women and Native Americans still have high rates of interracial marriage. Black women were the least likely to marry non-Black men at only 7% in 2017, and only 4% were married to white men. In 2012, the Census Bureau released a report that studied the history of marriage in the United States. They discovered some startling statistics when calculating marriage by race. Now, first off, let's go ahead and say something. When they say that, they're not accounting for the fact that Black slaves, weren't even allowed to be married, and they broke up those families all the time. So when you hear something like that, please take it with a grain of salt. And I haven't gone over any of the other information like that, but when anything you've heard me say that sounds questionable, just take that with a grain of salt. They found African Americans aged 35 and older were more likely to be married to white Americans from 1890 until somewhere around the 1960s. Not only did they swap places during the 1960s, but in 1980, the number of married African Americans began a staggering climb from about 10% to more than 25%. By 2010, while the percentage for white women remained under 10% and just over 10% for white men, the first two charts below are charts included in a report. Only the headings have been altered by Black demographics. I think I have all these charts too. So I have all these charts in there. Don't worry. It's going to be in the video. You'll see it. It won't be on this part though. 1 second. This does not prove causation. However, it shows that they are related due to the assumption that men in prison are less likely to marry. This is something funny. 1 second. And then let's just talk about something, serious here for a moment. Black people as a whole, and I know it sounds sad, and that's the end of the article. And I'm gonna go to this other one, the Pew Research. I actually had that website up first. Now let's go to the pewresearch.org. We're gonna just read this article. Key facts about race and marriage 50 years after Loving versus Virginia. In 1967, the Supreme Court ruled in the Loving versus Virginia that marriage across the racial lines was legal throughout the country. Interracial marriage has increased steadily since then. 1 in 6 U.S. newlyweds, 17%, were married to a person of a different race or ethnicity in 2015, a more than fivefold increase from 3% in 1967 among all married people in 2015, not just those who recently wed. 10% are now intermarried, 11 million in total. Here are more key findings from Pew Research Center about interracial and interethnic marriage and families on the 50th anniversary of the landmark Supreme Court decision. 1. A growing share of adults say interracial marriage is generally a good thing for American society, because it's called amalgamation. Yeah, if you all amalgamate and all accept your code anyway, sleeping with your enemy. It can't sound any crazier. Nearly, and I bet you that's coming from white folk and anybody who wants to fit in like white folk. Nearly 4 in 10 adults, 39%, say the growing number of people marrying someone in a different race is good for society. That same 4 in 10, 39% are probably people who are from interracial couples. You understand? I'm telling you, a large number of that is from them. And they said that's up from 24% in 2010. Right, because 7 years later, there's more of these people with mixed babies. Anyway, man, adults younger than 30, those with at least a bachelor's degree, those who identify as a Democrat or lean Democratic are especially likely to say this. Right, liberal, non-conservative, you want to wipe out your own race thinking people. Americans today are also less likely to oppose a close relative marrying someone of a different race or ethnicity. Now 10% said that they would oppose such a marriage in their family, down from 31% in 2000. A lot of those people have died. The biggest decline has occurred among non-blacks. Today, 14% of non-blacks say they would oppose a close relative marrying a black person, down from 63% in 1990. Once again, all those people have died off. A lot of them have had mixed interbreed babies, so now they don't feel the same way. But anyway, man. Asian and Hispanic newlyweds are most likely to be intermarried. Nearly 3 in 10 Asian newlyweds were married to someone of a different race or ethnicity in 2015, as were 27 Hispanic newlyweds. Intermarriage for these groups was especially prevalent among the U.S. born. 39% for Hispanics and almost half of the Asian borns were intermarried in 2015. Although Asian and Hispanic newlyweds are most likely to be intermarried, overall increases in intermarriage have driven in part by rising intermarriage rates among black and white newlyweds. Okay, the most dramatic increase has occurred among black newlyweds, whose intermarriage rate more than tripled from 5% in 1980 to 18% in 2015. Among whites, it rose from 4% to 11% in the same time period. Number 3, the most common racial or ethnic pairing among the newlyweds intermarried couples is one Hispanic and one white spouse. The next most common intermarriage pairing is one white and one Asian. Some 12% of newlywed intermarried couples include one white and one multiracial spouse, and 11% include one white and one black spouse. And that's not telling you how many men or women. See, understand, they're playing on the words there. They're playing on the stats and the numbers when they say all this stuff. Here we go. Newlywed black men are twice as likely as newlywed black men to be intermarried. In 2015, 24% of recently married black men were intermarried, compared with 12% of newly married black women. These are also notable gender differences among Asian newlyweds. Just over 1/3 of Asian newlywed women were intermarried in 2015, compared with 21% of recently married Asian men. Among white and Hispanic newlyweds, intermarriage rates are similar for men and women. Number 5, since 1980, an educational gap in intermarriage has begun to emerge. While the rate of intermarriage did not differ significantly by educational attainment in 1980, today there is a modest gap. In 2015, 14% of newlyweds with a high school diploma or less were married to someone of a different race or ethnicity. In contrast, 18% of those with some college experience or 19 experience with a bachelor's degree or more were intermarried. So they're saying the more education you have, the more likely you are to be intermarried, because the more likely you are to have been introduced and socialized with these different groups of people. When you don't have very much money, very much education, right, you're not going to be around people who don't normally look different than you. So the only way you're going to marry out is if you're in an area that's like that. However, that's not explained in the stats. I'm just trying to give you guys the information as I go about it, as much as I can, without making this take too long. The educational gap is most striking among Hispanics. Nearly 46% of Hispanic newlyweds with a bachelor's degree were married to someone of a different race or ethnicity in 2015. Yet this share drops to 16% for those with a high school diploma or less. That's because those with a high school diploma or less are much closer connected to their roots of their culture, and they haven't given up. Well, understand that this is called multiracial, ethnicity, not multicultural, right on? Because you can't merge cultures. Can you dig it? However, it's actually literally impossible to do. The amalgamation of cultures means that one is eventually going to be made obsolete, rendered obsolete. Maybe practices from that culture will be still attained or obtained, but that won't be something that they do regularly. However, moving on. Number 6, 1 in 7 infants, 14%, are multiracial or multi-ethnic. This share is nearly triple the share, 5% in 1980. Multiracial or multi-ethnic infants, including children younger than 1 year old, who live with two parents and whose parents are each of a different race. Those with one Hispanic and one non-Hispanic parent, and those with one parent who identifies as multiracial. Among interracial and interethnic infants, the most common racial and ethnic combination for parents is one Hispanic white and one Hispanic parent. The next largest share of infants have at least one parent who identifies as multiracial, while 14% have one white and one Asian parent, and 10% have one white and one black parent. The share of infants with with interracial or interethnic parents also varies considerably across states, from 44% among those in Hawaii to 4% among those in Vermont. Number 7, Hawaii has the highest share of intermarried newlyweds of any major metropolitan area in the U.S. 4 in 10 newlyweds in Honolulu are married to someone of a different race or ethnicity, followed by the newlyweds living in the Las Vegas, Santa Barbara, California metro areas. At the same time, just 3% newlyweds in around Asheville, North Carolina, and Jackson, Mississippi are intermarried. Okay, active metro. So that's it. That's it for this. So there's not a lot of information as far as the numbers are concerned for these different groups. I wanted to get this information out there. I wanted y'all to see them. I know you're like, why don't you have the white people up here too? Thinking about it, just might. Just might do the white and Hispanic one, just because that's another one that there's a lot of them I have to get to. But just know that you're going to be hearing this information over and over and over and over and over and over again. The same type of information about different groups when I can find it. This is huge. This is huge. These people are out here sleeping with their enemies. Notice it won't say multicultural, right on? Because you can't merge cultures. It's impossible. It's impossible, y'all. It's impossible. Once again, if you amalgamate with somebody, right, you're willfully assimilating, and then when you assimilate, you are now compromising yourself. We don't compromise. We cooperate. And we don't cooperate with anybody who has a different ideals than us. It's just that damn simple. However, my people, I know what I'm saying isn't very important. I know what I'm saying doesn't really tickle the fancy. However, I wish I could just stress this stuff super hard, I just want to get the information out there. I just want to say what it is. Now, notice they don't talk about black and Asians. They didn't even talk about black and Hispanics. So I'm going to speak on that for a couple minutes because I can do that. And what it is that I want you to look at and think about. Number one, you've already seen pictures, right, of people who are intermarried. And I have them separated from the Asians to the Hispanics as far as, because I don't want people to get too confused. And what I want you to think about is number one, why would they, 1967, right around the same time they started saying that black people had souls and were humans, is when they said that people can intermarry. Now, there's a chart here that you guys are going to look at, and you're going to see the increase of willful participants from blacks from 1990 on down. Now, what major thing has happened in 28 years that the black man would leave his own community, right? Before that 28 period took place, that he would feel the need to leave his own community and branch out. That does not placate him. That does not exonerate him, nor does it mitigate the charges I rail against all these people. No, it does not. No, it does not. The Asian connection, same thing with that. These are people who will call you less than a dog. Still now to this day. And will act like they're your friend the moment they see you. People, you are laying with your enemies. Once again, if this don't apply to you, I'm not talking to you. But if this applies to you, I am talking right at you. And you are wrong on more levels than one. But that is for the Most High God to discern, not me. You will see that all the things you have been told are so wrong and so false and so far from true that none of which will save you come the day of retribution that is coming to these people who have done wickedly and have never ever sought to have their wickedness exposed nor to accept punishment for their wrongdoings. With that said, you people who lay with your enemies, happily, willfully, wantonfully, I cannot wait till you get what you have coming. Notice it was all the educated folks who married out. And so for some odd reason, the stupid ones didn't. The lesser educated ones didn't. I wonder why that is. I wonder why that is. Maybe less of the witchcraft influences of this society to permeate their minds. So-called technology to make them think differently and to embrace the future. However, amalgamate and breed yourselves out, why don't you? And do it already. It only takes 3 generations anyway. However, I'm done. And you are still sleeping with your enemy.